then it was kind of this horrifying thing where all of a sudden, like 60, 70 customers at the same time said, okay, we're in. And we need to be live in 3 weeks. So they went from not needing it to everybody needing it. In 3 weeks span, it was mayhem, and it came with cost. It was the best sales quarter in the company's history, for sure. But it was having a pretty big downstream effect on our operations team. One of the worst things a business can do is burn out employees. While there are many cascading negative effects of burnout, there are times when you and your team need to burn the midnight oil. Still, if you or your team are going into work tired from the day before, you can bet that it's going to slowly eat away at your market position, profitability, and company culture. In our final episode of Season 2 and of our Employee Shenanigans series, we address employee burnout and how we managed a near coup d'etat of our business. Hello, everyone, live from Toronto. It's Startup Difference. Although actually we're not live, but that's fine. It's okay. You get what I'm going for. We're just happy to be here. All right. Jeez. Hello, Chris. Welcome to the show. Today we're talking about burning out. Yeah. How much that sucks.
Wow, I've been there. I was born to burn out.
That's oh man, how many taglines do you have now? You have born to be acquired. What was the other one? There was another one. Oh man, it's gonna drive me nuts.
Something else.
Born to burn out is really good.
Yeah,
shoot, that's gonna really bother me. Okay, you think about that. I'm gonna,
burning out was my go-to move. I was great at this. You're allowed to do it when you're a founder. You're not allowed to do it as an employee.
Remember you just coming into the office, just like,
no longer like blinking in unison, like just one eyelid at a time. Yeah.
Yes, you had some rough ones, but we're really actually talking about so like founders can burn out, and that's bad. I thought though, because we're in the Employee Shenanigans series, I think it makes more sense to actually focus on when employees burn out. And there's one really specific story, and it's like legitimately traumatic. Like I'm nervous, and I don't normally feel super nervous about talking about anything on this podcast or in general. But in this case, it's a biggie. It's a real biggie.
Having flashbacks of traumatic
like
events.
Some PTSD here of like what actually happened. So let's get into this. So as we mentioned before, in many episodes now, we would make folks sort of leave by 5 p.m. in our business. I would literally go around to various desks or even like Zoom call people and be like, hey, what are you doing here? I remember doing this all the time. It was kind of funny, right? And actually, for what it's worth, some people found it really weird at first, especially when they first joined the company, because I was just like really aggressively trying to enforce this thing around like the goalposts. We work during the goalpost. By the way, makes your staff more efficient because they only have that amount of time to work on stuff. But anyway, I digress. So this did strike a healthy balance between work and personal life for our staff. And we really wanted to show that we respected their personal life. But the other thing that it did, and we were very transparent about this, is that we said, okay, you don't have to work after 5, but just so someday that could happen. Someday I get what's called a get out of jail free card. I need your help to do something. And Chris, I know you used it only a handful of times. And I think this was probably the biggest time I ever used it. Like we really, really tried not to abuse this power because again, we just respected the personal lives of our employees.
So when I think back to the development side of it, I think maybe twice ever I had to ask an employee to stay late or something like that because we had some fire we were dealing with.
I think it's more than that. I'm going to double you, but like go to 4, but still
maybe
that's 4 times out of like 10 years.
But do you ever remember this happening for any non-developer staff?
Yeah. Yes.
Other than your story that you're going to tell here momentarily. Now I know it was over a prolonged period of time, but before that, I don't remember that ever really happening. I think we were pretty good at staying within the goalposts.
Yeah, definitely like 99% of the time we are between the goalposts. I mean, there might be something like on occasion, like a sales thing, and I needed somebody to stick around for 20 minutes because the person was going to call late or to finish a proposal, but like that was pretty unlikely. And sometimes we try to make that up to people anyway. But no, this was a totally different animal. So in this particular situation, so it was the pandemic, and the pandemic was totally crazy. And we had come out with some new product lines, and it was because we were forced to. It was pivot. It was again, that's the coercion of your business, and we because of market forces in this case, and we needed to do something. Our revenues, think your hockey stick, and then all of a sudden it kind of started going flat. We did not have much net new happening. Budgets were being slashed, that kind of stuff. Thankfully our contracts were pretty lock solid, so that was fine. But it was a little bit of a scary time from a revenue perspective. So in working with you, Chris, you had the foresight of I think there's going to be some COVID functions that we can probably provide to organizations. And those two functions were these self-assessments. So when you go to a university or college or a healthcare facility or whatever, an organization, you'd fill out a questionnaire and be like, hey, I don't have COVID. And they would, it would sort of go into a database and confirm stuff. And it could even affect whether or not doors unlocked and things it was pretty interesting, actually, software. And it was kind of a complementary to our offering in that we had an app at the organization that was probably prefixed or suffixed with the word safe. So we were right there. So if you went to UCLA and you had the Bruin Safe app, there was an app. There you go. That's probably going to relate to my safety, which is in those days was related to COVID. But really where this got nuts was when we started doing these things called vaccine passports. And just a quick side note, we didn't realize we were doing anything political with that. We weren't trying to. It was just we were verifying vaccine records. That's all we were doing. And then providing that data to the school so the school could know, or the organization could know, if that person was. And
the reason they were doing it was because the governments in those jurisdictions were requiring it.
This is really what happened. And this is actually the nature of the problem. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we went from, so we have this tool. And I remember on a weekly basis, I would say to Chris, no one's going to buy this. And the next week I'm like, everyone's going to buy this. And I was like, no one's going to buy this. It was kind of going back and forth. And then one day, the governments in some of our main jurisdictions where we have a lot of our customers said, if you are a major organization and you have a higher education institution, for instance, and you have people coming to campus, which we're all trying to do, you need to know the vaccine status of all those people. Okay, so you want to talk about a sudden customer interest tsunami. So basically, we were perfectly positioned. All of our customers had an app with us, obviously. They're all called Safe Something. We had modules for it. We could deploy it without updating in the app stores. So we could get this thing going really fast. We were ready to go. And we were getting really good at we kind of knew what was going to happen because we had actually executed this product with one customer in the market already. So, but then it was kind of this horrifying thing where all of a sudden 60, 70 customers at the same time said, okay, we're in. And we need to be live in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. So they went from not needing it to everybody needing it. In 3 weeks span, it was mayhem, and it came with cost. It was the best sales quarter in the company's history, for sure. But it was having a pretty big downstream effect on our operations team. Those are the people who implemented the software. And suddenly they went from kind of pretty casual. Don't get me wrong, those self-assessments were kind of taxing. Shout out to Joey and the support team. He knows what's up. That was crazy. But the actual implementations of these vaccine passports were complicated, required a lot of thought, and of course needed to happen really quickly. And there was tons direct oversight in the customer's organization from some of the most powerful people at the organization. It's presidents of schools were interested in how this was going.
The chancellor of the university is involved in the project.
Chancellor Palpatine. Good. It was very interesting. So it was having a really huge impact on our team, and I could feel the coup brewing. I could feel the burnout pushing, and because I had to turn around to my team and say, "Okay, guys," because I also manage our operations team as well as our sales group, so I kind of had visibility on both. And said, "Okay, we're going to do this. We're going to make this happen." And don't get me wrong, we built tools, we did things. The developers helped to try to make it us more efficient by building more tools. But this was a lot of pressure suddenly, and we had to do it. There was no maybe like in some cases, the money was already in the accounts. Like we had to do this. And so we were pushing and pushing. And then the big fights started to happen pretty frequently because the workload had basically doubled or tripled in some cases for some of these folks. I got in the trenches with them. I fought side by side with them. I did projects. For the first time in like 7 or 8 years, I did implementations start to finish. I was the project manager for some of these deals because we just had to do it. It was so time sensitive. And it was, exceptional times call for exceptional measures sort of thing. Right. And I remember even like one time we had one customer reach out to us on Labor Day weekend. So, the preceding Tuesday, that school was going to be open. And they said, we need it right now. We're totally screwed. And I said, you know what? For a small, substantial fee, I will make this happen for you. And I did. And I built it myself over the weekend. The team didn't even know. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was crazy. And it was some of the most tense interactions I ever had with that team. And here's the effing nasty thing about burnout is it shows up when you're most busy.
Of course. Why wouldn't it?
Right? So
yeah.
Let's and I'm talking a lot here, but Chris, feel free to interrupt me like basically at any point. But let's talk about some table setting on how to manage burnout. So our first myth in this particular episode kind of ties back to some of the themes of this season so far. So recall that employees are not going to generally be as bought in as you. Like you're the co-founder, you are the founders, you get that. And it's a myth to think that you created some sort of team that's like immune to this burnout. Like, yeah, you invest in these people. Yeah, you think they can handle it. Yes, they have tools. Yes, you've invested in them. But at the end of the day, if you're pushing them super hard or if the market or whatever, if you're in this kind of circumstance, there's going to be cracks. The pressure is going to start to build. They're human. So I went trying to find some data on some of this. And it actually turns out like burnout's like crazy common. So Deloitte conducted an external, so consulting firm, if you don't know, conducted an external marketplace survey of 1,000 full-time U.S. employees and found that about, this is crazy, a whopping 77% of professionals had experienced burnout at their current job.
Wow.
3 out of 4 people. Now that's, 1,000 isn't the biggest sample size, but it's not the smallest either. It's something. So there's probably the truth. It's probably a little bit less in reality in general in the market, but it's a huge percentage. Burnout will come for you and for your team. And going back to this theme that it's just going to happen when you're least willing to deal with it.
Yeah.
I remember
because you're probably burnt out too.
Yeah. I was working. Yeah. The only time I was more burnt out was during the acquisition when we were trying to sell the business. And it was, those late lawyer calls and all that. This was a different animal. It was just trying to get, 30 deployments out the door this week, next week, another one. And mind you, at the same time, I'm also getting hit from sales questions from sales reps that are working on these deals that are closing. So I have visibility on the whole thing and workload on the whole thing. It was
the other piece that you're probably not mentioning very much here is that the customers are also freaking out. Like they're dealing with a global health crisis and trying to reopen. I remember having one of our clients said to me something like, my boss told me that failure is not an option. Like, whoa, that's a lot of pressure. And by the way, it's software, right? It's not quite right the first time, but you tweak it. Yeah. And then it's perfect. It's not like a blind one-time shot. And then if you miss that one shot, it's like failure. It's such a weird time to be dealing with. Just everybody is terrified. Everybody's burnt out. So yeah, it was a really tough time.
It was tough. And so, and I'll go into this more a little bit later, but what do some of these cracks look like that I'm talking about? Well, I started getting a lot of questions like, okay, like how much more work am I going to get here? Like, like questions from team members, and it used to be isolated one-on-one. A couple of them would say, well, it's getting, I'm kind of getting busy. Like this is getting to be a lot. And then, I'd say, okay, well, we got to push through because we got to do this. And, it's important for the company. And they say, okay. And they go back and they go do it. And then they'd come back, a couple of days later, hey, this is still like a lot of work. Like it's not really going down. I'm completing projects, but it's actually just going up. I'm getting more projects as it happens. And, and you start, and then, there start to be some asks like, are we going to get paid more for this? And we're like, yeah, we'll find a way to give you bonuses. And I'm going to talk about how you deal with burnout in just a second, but yeah, okay, we're going to do some bonuses. And then we had a big fight over, and I'll just be forthcoming about this. We had a fight over like how overtime works. And I didn't think it applied to software companies. Heads up, I was wrong, at least in Ontario. Depends on your jurisdiction. But I was fighting that at first. And there was all these like, these are big blowups. These are not casual things, because they started to also organize. So by the way, I love my ops team. Shout out to you guys. My heart goes out to you. All I can offer you is my undying love. But the reality here was like they were PO'd big time, and they were coming together and channeling as one voice of being super pissed. And it was a problem. Here's the other scary part for a founder. You need those people. If they stopped or walked away or quit, you're dead. There was, I literally just didn't have enough time. Even if I worked every minute of it, if I pulled 5, all-nighters in a row, wouldn't have made it. So, okay. Let me give me a second here.
One thing I might just interject to mention here, okay, is that our ops team definitely took it on the chin and, fought through this, and it was incredible. The development side of it, we tried really hard to write code to make it easier and chip away at some of that stuff. I use the term chip away because literally it was a big problem and we were chipping at it, but we were all trying to keep them in a good place and keep everything moving forward. But it was still remarkably challenging, and I'm not surprised that they were feeling burnt out.
So let's talk about. We're going to come back to what we did here in just a second, Tim, and I mentioned a few things there, but let's talk about burnout sort of more generally again. And there's basically 2 ways that you can deal with burnout. One is better than the other. I'm just going to tell you right now. So you can proactively identify when burnout is coming, which you don't always have the benefit of. We didn't know those our customers. I also love them, but they sort of blew it because they told us with 3 weeks to go, right? Yeah. So that was hard. Like we could have seen that was a possibility, but it's really hard to put a big investment into something if it's not going to, if it might never happen. And then the other side of that is reactive response. So what do you do when you're under fire? You're let's go back to the trenches. You're being shelled. You're there with everybody else. Like, what do you do to keep the team composed and focused on sort of the mission?
Just give everybody some days off, right?
Yeah, go home every Wednesday off. So, okay, and here's
not
the
in that moment.
You're not in that moment. Okay, so you're not going to get any leave, from the trenches when the enemy is assaulting your lines. You gotta be there. So the theme here is and surprise, surprise, for proactive it's actually, or reactive, it's all about empathy. Okay, understand and act on the concerns of your employees. It's very tempting to be like, well, that's nice, but you need to suck it up. Like, dude, first off, you can't say that anymore. We are way past the days of sucking up, or using that term. But this is actually about going deeper on people, rather than being like, this is a waste of my time. And that's going to be one of the toughest things for you to do as a founder. So let's start with proactive things, though. So respecting employees. So this is we're not under immediate fire. How do you prepare yourself for something like this? Well, respect the employees' personal lives. This is one thing that we did really well. So they have other things they do, other than you. They volunteer. They foster dogs. We had somebody who did that. They have, part-time gigs. Maybe they got 4 kids, whatever. They got other stuff they do. So you can start by recognizing that they can take their work seriously, but it also prioritize it differently in their life than you. And that's a real obstacle for founders, particularly because in a lot of cases, your baby, aside from perhaps your literal children, your baby is the business. So it's a tough gap to bridge.
Well, I think you did a good job of that too, Dave. I think you were very you were aware of those things.
But I learned that skill. I knew it a little bit, but I learned it a lot. I got a lot better at it in that moment, because it was almost like, I don't know if you've ever looked in your employees' eyes and seen genuine fear. But that's what, I really saw fear. And that was scary to me. You can't look scared, but I was scared, man. That was the real deal. Functionally, you want to gear your elements of your culture too that celebrate personal life. So we kicked people at 5. We had the social hour. And we did that so we could talk about non-work stuff. Like, I don't know about you, Chris, but I learned a lot about our employees during social hour.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Consider them all friends because we hung out, yeah.
And like, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, they even still invite me to social hour every once in a while, even though I'm not an employee anymore. Yeah.
I get fewer invites than you probably because I was HR, but that's fine. So then the second thing is like, and part of that too is like, there's a benefit of like investing in their personal lives. It's like, yeah, of course you're getting to know them, which is good. And that they care and all that stuff, which is not to be downplayed, but it also gives you important information about their current productivity. Like sometimes burnout sneaks up on you because it's totally unrelated to the business. Like the business might be totally fine, but maybe they just went through a breakup or their family member is sick, or, you might be able to spot burnout coming because of by the nature of the relationships you have with employees. And you can be more realistic about what your expectations are for them during that time. That's the real deal. Like you're a really good manager if you can do that. Just straight up, you're beyond a manager. Like you're like a friend to them, and you should be. Like, and friends can have real conversations with each other too, but like you kind of need to understand these people and really deeply to be an effective leader of them. And then and I guess like, just touching on the managing expectations too, like, yeah, it's like, and as we said, like we had this get out of jail free card, right. And we communicated that constantly, right, Chris? Like that was.
Well, yeah, but we always communicated it, but we never actually used it, or very rarely. Right.
But
and that was another one of those things where,
worthless.
Well, yeah, but if and we always said that, oh, but hey, if we ever really need you, obviously please stick around. We would really appreciate that. But it was kind of like, yeah. But that never happens.
Yeah.
That never happens, like, it's kind of weird how even saying things sometimes without actually using it doesn't really signal that it's a real thing. It's a thing you just say. It's not a thing that you actually do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think,
but then until one day, pandemic, and then you really do need that. Yeah,
and the world just like goes totally bonkers. But
yeah,
and I think that if whenever we did use the card, the get out of jail free card, even in this case, I think what we tried to do is clearly communicate like why are we doing this? What's at stake, and how long? Like set expectations. Like they're literally putting in like more effort. They deserve additional insight and transparency. That's just fair. Like, don't leave them in the dark. Don't be like, well, we got to do this because, whatever, because it's pretty important to us. Like, I'd be really specific. If we don't do this, the financial position of the company will be materially worse off. Like, we will be in trouble. That's a real thing to say to someone. Now, like reactive. So this is where I was in this zone. It's way tougher. Like you're in hell trying to get through some big problem and an HR issue pops up and you're like, wow, I don't have time for this. Like, wow, you're almost pissed off that they brought something to you, which is crazy. That's the worst reaction to have. Like, do not go on to a call pissed off that they came to you with a problem, because then you have a civil war on your hands. You have your coup d'etat, happening. Yeah. Like it is a big, big problem. And remember, without them, you're toast.
Yeah.
Like you're in big trouble. Scary stuff. So I found an article on this anyway. So when your employee tells you they're burned out, like how do you deal with this? And so this is again in that reactive category. And so Noemi Pertel, an expert in this field, suggested sort of like 5 ways that you can sort of handle this when an employee tells you, or you detect that they're burnt out. So you're reacting to it. So first is that you treat their concern seriously. So just going back to what I just said, like don't brush them off. Right. This is wild. Here's another crazy stat in all this. I can't believe how poorly burnout is handled. But anyway, so a Gallup poll showed that only 1 in 4 employees believed their boss cared about their well-being. What? 1 in 4? Only 1 in 4 believed that like their boss cared.
Wow.
That's nuts. Awful. So 75% didn't. Or or indifferent at least. Like I guess there's some percentage in there like bosses like actively working against them, which is a terrifying world to be in. But like, you got to ensure the employee feels heard and that you care about them. Like it's not just like some token, like you see it on a slide in an HR presentation at your company. Like it's the real deal. You need to actually invest in these people and they'll know if you're not. It's really easy to tell when someone doesn't care. Think about like when you go to a party, go to a bar, go see your friends, whatever. You know when someone's not listening to you. Yeah. Wow. Oh, no way.
You're on the Zoom call and you can clearly tell they're writing an email to somebody else while you're speaking to them, like stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like
cool.
in our case, like because we were so busy at first, again, like I'm guilty of some of this too. Because I was so busy at first, I was kind of like when the early concerns were starting to bubble up, the little problems, I was like, give them a 15-minute meeting because I got to bounce back to whatever it is I was doing. I didn't give them the time, and it wasn't landing. I knew I had to listen to them.
Yeah.
I wish I had done that differently the first time. I think I could have prevented a really bad fire if I had done that better, but that's how it goes. So then after that, and this kind of builds on this, the second point was understanding their experience of burnout. So, this is sort of like the what of the situation. So is it
let them explain it?
Yeah.
Let them really kind of get it out.
But it's experience versus like the next point, which is going to be identify the root cause. So the experience is like, what does it feel like? Like, is it like your job mastery? Like, are you just like failing at your job? Is that why? Is it emotional or physical exhaustion, which was definitely where we were? Are they like cynical, caring less about the customer? Maybe they've been doing the same job for a long time. That's a different way to get burnt out. Yeah. But it's one of those sort of things that you got to figure out that experience. Like, what does it feel like to them to be burnt out? Because then you can get to the root cause. So once you identify that root cause of burnout, like there's basically three kinds. There's overload, under challenged, and neglect. Okay. So like for us, it was overload.
Like, though, under challenged might be kind of part of it as well, because like it wasn't really like tough work. It was just like a lot of crazy work. Like it's not like it wasn't like
intense. It was
intellectually stimulating. Work. Yeah, maybe that's it. It was
sometimes it was because the customers. So this is a blessing and the curse of very configurable software. Like the customers wanted the crazy ways to do things. Well, if they approve it, then we want 5 different outcomes depending on this, that. Like it was like really, it got so complicated fast because these were decision trees we were basically building.
Yeah, and the committee would come up with some really weird stuff, and it was just going way beyond what, like I know from the development side, we were trying to write code to manage some of these crazy scenarios. So yeah, it was way beyond kind of what we had envisioned where they wanted to go with it. So yeah I agree. Yeah.
So then, consider both short and long-term solutions. So you listen to the ask, and at first they said, in the short term, we should be doing overtime pay, which is actually legally something we should have been doing. And we did end up doing, and we figured it out retroactively too, for what it's worth.
We'd just never done that before
because we never done that. We never
didn't know what the heck it was. Yeah.
So I ignored it at first, and I paid for it because I just ignored their suggested short-term solution. I came around later. And we also did some other things financially. We said, okay, like what if we bonus you because we know you're working a lot of other time too. And obviously this is exceptional work and those sorts of things. And we knew we had the capital because we had so many customers paying for stuff. Like it was one of these like kind of like great, awful situations. And then I started working with them directly. They just said, I have too much work. And I said, okay, well, what's overwhelming you? Like what, give me one thing. Okay. And they'd say, well, I don't have time for this. Okay. Give it to me. I did it. I worked late. Yeah. I got in there. I fought with them. I like fought with them as in like by their side, the customers driving me nuts. Let me talk to them. Give them a call. Hey, what's going on here? Why are you giving them a hard time? And I know we're all stressed. And by the way, the customer, like you said, they couldn't have been more stressed. Yeah. It was the craziest time. Normally pretty composed people. It was wild. People who are like literally trained on composure.
They're like emergency management professionals who are trained on composure are just completely beside themselves. And I think part of it was a function of their environment because their bosses and people that didn't normally interact with them were coming down hard on them to come up with solutions to this. And they had like very few resources. And they're like, what's that saying, like for lifeguards where you go out to like save somebody who's drowning. And there's a point where you actually might have to let them drown because they'll take you down with them. Yeah. And there was some of that sometimes happening where we knew that if it didn't go well, we were going to be firmly planted underneath that bus for their bosses and things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Was this bus underwater? But the other thing here too is like
mixing analogies here.
Mixing metaphors is fine. But here's the thing that's like that also like relates to all this is just like they were burnt out. Yeah. Like the customer was burnt out. So like everybody's dealing with this and it's tough. It was really tough. We were on crazy things happening in our personal lives too. It was just a really tough.
I feel a Chris metaphor coming on.
Oh, get drum roll. What is it?
One of my favorites. When you're going through hell, keep going.
Nice. Winston Churchill or Chris Dickinson. So And then, so like really that's true. And then afterwards, once you're kind of through some of this, is like create a monitoring plan. So you implement some of these things. Okay, we're going to pay more. I'm going to help you with like, and then check in with people. How you feeling? You okay today? Are you going to make it through this? Do you need something? Moving on. Next person, check in with the team. They need your help as much as you need them. So this kind of became the David Sinkinson episode. Dave screw up. I don't like this. I thought we usually focus on yours.
I know. Usually it's my mess ups. Did we both wear the App Armor t-shirts like in solidarity with this terrible episode that we had to go through with our team?
I was just wearing the retro. I was wearing the retro. I thought it was kind of fun. But yeah, I think
the retro jersey. Yeah.
The retro, yeah. If you want, maybe we should start a merch store and have this as one of like the retro things you can buy. I'm sure Ray wouldn't mind. Or Motorola.
I believe all the trademarks are owned by Motorola now, so we probably can't do that.
So let's wrap this up. Burnout is brutal. It affects most businesses, and we'll come for yours. It will happen when things are probably the most crazy. This will feel tough. You will want to ignore it. For the love of God, don't. It's really best to be proactive if you can. That's your best case scenario. The way to be effectively proactive is by investing in people and being there with your employees, understanding them and kind of being in the business a little bit more. Be reactive when you need to and follow some of the steps we were talking about, which is treating it seriously, understand, listen, find the root cause, consider how to fix it short and long term, and then monitor the success of those plans. And then, after that, it's really just about pushing on. You'll get through it and just treat them like people, and you've got a better shot of successfully navigating sort of this intense process for your business. So
I'm proud of you, bro.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Hey, Chris, that is the end of this episode and the end of season 2 of Startup Different. Thank you so much, folks, for listening to us this season. We will have a season 3 by popular demand, and we're looking forward to it. We're going to try some more new stuff. We got a few. We're thinking about maybe some guests too. We'll see how this goes. Well, who knows? And we're really, really looking forward to that. But for now, please, as always, rate the pod. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you with season 3. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. If you like what you heard, subscribe to and rate Startup Different in your favorite podcast app. If you want to see our radio faces, check us out on YouTube at Startup Different and look us up on social. We're probably there if you are. And lastly, do you want to feature your startup on the show? Reach out via our website, startupdifferent.com. See you next time.